Shalom Aleichem, and welcome again. And thank you, Rabbi and Chazak. And we like to continue Halachot Bishul. Specifically, we spoke about Chazara, Sheya, Hatmana. Let's take one of the cases that are very, very common, and that is a person that wants to warm up something on Shabbat. Now we know that warming up or something on Shabbat falls under the Hisur of Chazara, and we already learned the laws. Let's just very quickly review them. We know that in order to have something put back on the blech on Shabbat, on the hot plate, is required to be fully cooked, not 99% cooked, but rather 100% cooked. Because if it's not 100% cooked, let's say it's 99% cooked, that 1% that you are cooking on Shabbat is a violation of bishul, cooking on Shabbat. It's a Torah violation, and therefore you must know that your food is 100% cooked. And we already spoke in the past and warned about all the takeaway, takeout food that you buy. You have to make sure that they're 100% baked or cooked before putting them on a hot plate, on something that is hot, because if it's not 100% cooked, as many of those things that you buy from the takeout places for Shabbat, then that extra warming would be considered cooking on Shabbat. It's a violation of Torah. So now, the very basic law we said is that you have to have something that is 100% cooked. And now you have different laws that come into Chazara. First of all, the fire must be covered. That's what we call garuf vekatum. It has to be covered. So that's the reason many use blech, a certain metal piece to cover the fire on top of the stove. Others use hot plate. That is another form of covering the fire. The hot plate itself, we said that there's a machloket. If that's considered, that's sufficient, or you need to cover that as well. That since there are those that consider that something that people cook on, they do put food that is not yet fully cooked to heat up on it and cook it and finish the cooking. So therefore, some poskim are machmir. That's why many put aluminum foil on top of the hot plate as well. Those that are lenient rely on those that say that it's not normal, it's not meant to be cooked, it's only meant to warm things up, especially that you can see that this is for Shabbat and it's not for cooking. So this is the opinion of Chacham Ovadia and of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and others. But in order to be able to return something to the hot plate or to the hot plata, it needs to be, as we're saying, it needs to cover the fire. You can't put it straight on a stove because it needs to be garuf vekatum. The fire needs to be covered. And now there's also a few other things that is a machloket between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim. According to Sfaradim, the food that you're returning on top of the hot plate or the plata or any other place that is hot has to be the heat level of yad soledet if it is liquid, as we'll speak and explain soon. According to Ashkenazim, it could be less than that. It could be just warm. What's the level of warm? Warmth to the level that a person could eat it. It's edible. It's not cold enough that a person doesn't like eating it that way. It's warm enough that people can eat it enjoyably. So therefore, even though it's not yet yad soledet, it's still sufficient according to Ashkenazim. So on that, they are more lenient. On other things, they'll be more strict. What are the other things? According to Sfaradim, you're not allowed to put, once you took something out of the hot plate, you're not allowed to put it on the floor. But if you do, you can't return it. Once you put it on the floor, and some say even on your counter, that's also would be considered equal to putting something on the floor, then you're not allowed to take that and put it back on the hot plate because it's considered sheya chadasha. So like taking something new from the fridge and putting it for the first time on the hot plate, which is not permitted, needs to be chazara, returning. According to Ashkenazim, they're a little bit more strict than that. They need to hold it on the hand as well, and that demonstrates that they didn't let go of it yet. One hand is enough, one hand is sufficient, according to opinions that we spoke in the past shiurim. It's sufficient even though part of the pot is on the counter, let's say, and you're holding the other side with your hand, and this way you can use the other hand to just stir out whatever you need in order to eat, in order to scoop out whatever you need from that pot. And then you have another restriction by Ashkenazim, and that is to have in mind that you want to return it. According to Sfaradim, you don't need to do that. If you decide that you want to put it back, that is sufficient and it is fine. Now that we know those laws, we do find another interesting machloket in minhagim between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim that has to do with taking something out of the fridge and putting it on the hot plate. According to Ashkenazim, you'll see that they're very strict. They don't put anything on the hot plate at all on Shabbat, but rather, if they want to warm something up on Shabbat, they'll take, for instance, a pot, they put it upside down on top of the hot plate, and there they'll put their kugel, their chicken, whatever they want to warm up. But Sfaradim don't do that. Many Sfaradim put them straight on the hot plate, and what is the reason for that? Also, for instance, you'll see those that take trays, they put them upside down on top of the hot plate and just put things on top of it. Sfaradim don't do that. Ashkenazim do. Sfaradim just put it straight on the hot plate, and that would be sufficient. What is the reason for that? There is a contradiction in the Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Resh Nun Gimel. Shulchan Aruch writes in Seif Gimel one thing that contradicts what he says in Seif Hey. Seif Gimel, he says that if you wake up in the morning and you take a look at your food, let's say your chulent, your chamin, and you see that it's burning, it's drying, it's not going to hold until people come back from shul. You wake up 7 o'clock in the morning, people come back from shul at 12 o'clock, that's when they'll eat. It's another 5 hours from now. You don't think that it's going to make it, it's going to be very dry, and you want it not to be dry. So therefore, you want to reduce the heat that this chulent gets. What do? So what you could do, says the Shulchan Aruch, is you can pick it up, put some blech under it, put some separation between that and the fire, and then you put it back. And this way, it would reduce the heat, the very strong heat that right now is heating and drying your food. But he says you have to be very careful when you do that. Don't put the food, don't put the chulent pot, is our example, on the floor, because if you do that, then you can't put it back, because we said before that part of the Chazara conditions are not to put something on the floor. Once you put it on the floor, you can't put it back. So remember that this din, this halacha, requires you not to put something on the floor. And Seif Hey writes that if you have pandish is a certain dough that has meat inside, and now you want to put that on Shabbat on top of the hot plate or something like that, that would be permitted, even though you're taking it from the fridge, let's say, and you put it. So how is that possible? We just said that you can't even put the chulent pot on the floor. How could you take something like pandish, the dough with the meat inside, and put it on the hot plate or something like that? That should be asur. It's a contradiction. So over here we found 3 answers. One answer is the Dagul Mirvava. The Mishnah Berurah in Biur Halacha brings it down in Seif Gimel. He says that the Dagul Mirvava, that there's a difference between them. The pandish, to heat it up in such a way, is not normal, and therefore you're doing something that's unusual. It's not something that's restricted. But putting that hot plate on, covering the food and putting on top of that the chulent, that's something that is regular, and therefore if you put it on the floor, you're not allowed to put and do something that is regular. Something that's unregular, something that's uncommon, one is permitted to do, like the pandish, like the dough with the meat that we just spoke. You put it in such a way that's not the regular and common way. That's the Dagul Mirvava. The Mishnah Berurah rejects that. He doesn't agree with that answer. He says a different answer that the Pri Megadim brings down, and that he brings down the halacha. He says that when you cover the food, as we are speaking with the chulent, you cover the not the food, but rather the fire. That is something that is considered regular, covering such a fire. And it's not considered, when you put the food on that, it's not considered like it is something that is a chazara that's permitted, and therefore it is asur. Unlike that putting the cover in such a way, he says that the pandish, what we're talking about, you're putting it in such a way that you don't actually put it on a hot plate, but rather on top of a pot, let's say that's upside down. This is the way he explains. And therefore, when we're dealing with putting it on top of something that is upside down, it's not considered chazara, and therefore such a thing is permitted. And that is what the Ashkenazim rely on, that they cover the food with upside down tray, upside down pot, or whatever it is, and put it on top, since that is not part of the Isur of chazara, in such a way that is more lenient than that, doesn't have the restrictions of chazara, doesn't have the conditions of chazara, and therefore such a thing would be permitted. This is the Ashkenazi opinion. The third answer that we found to this contradiction is the Magen Avraham in Siman Shin Yud Chet, which is what Chacham Ovadia says that one can follow. And this is why many Sfaradim are lenient, and that is the chiluk, the difference between something that has a sauce, liquid, or something that is completely dry. The halacha with pandish is food item that is completely dry, and since it's completely dry, it's permitted to take straight from the fridge as long as it's fully cooked and put it on top of the hot plate as long as the fire